bunch of liars with hands is what that was.
Use it the first day, like before in the way when you're going home, in the car. You're like making notes about how you're gonna make notes.
Yeah, it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize that the reason why it's there is because they're folding it, for the book, and it's just the extra pages.
Yeah.
I was a grown adult where I was like, oh, that's why. It's embarrassing.
Well, I guess I'll start. I wanted to start by going through introductions real quick in case people didn't know who anybody was. But my name's Daniel Fabello. I'm an editor and post supervisor for live action at Rooster Teeth. And it was 2 years working on Ruby and then switched over. So if later on you guys have any animation questions, feel free to ask them. But and Chris, I work with this guy a lot.
So just in respect to editing,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've edited pretty much every type of thing at some point, from a lot of shorts, stuff like Simple Walk into Mordor, Gauntlet, Immersion.
That was my first project with Chris, was Simple Walk to Mordor.
And then stuff like...
And just recently you finished, you were one of the editors on Laser Team.
Yeah, Laser Team, Social Disorder, 10 Little Roosters. I've pretty much edited something, every little of everything at some point.
Yeah, awesome. Lauren?
I'm Lauren. I'm the dean of the Rocket Jump Film School, actually. And I actually started after college in network TV and post, and doing post-PA work on the show Psych and Walking Dead and some... Yeah, there's some great editors. They're amazing. And then I came to Rocket Jump doing behind-the-scenes stuff, and I was shooting and editing, and now I'm cinematographer and heading up the school. So, yeah.
And I'm Freddie. I've edited a lot of stuff. I was freelance editing. I kind of got into movies because of editing, and like iMovie and the iMac. Those two things, like literally, had not those two things been around, I would definitely not be here. So I've done a lot of obviously the shorts, but also VGHS, all 3 seasons of that, and a lot of editorial. Love it. It's good times. Best editing gig ever was one time I got paid to slip the footage of Dream Theater's Jordan Petrucci when he was playing guitar, like to match the solo, because I could play guitar. I was like, oh no, that section is off by 3 frames and stuff. So that was like the nerdiest editing gig ever. Because they're like, Dream Theater fans will know. And like it has to be right, otherwise like we're gonna get like destroyed. So they had to line it up.
Well, I'm interested to, because we've got a wide range of, talent up here that's worked on just a wide range of things. But I wanted to gauge the audience. How many people here will do a few little raise your hand if like you've edited something? You've edited something once. Okay, everybody's an editor.
So a couple of you.
And now, how many of you edit something on like a weekly or daily basis? Okay, and how many of you are actively seeking work in the film or gaming industry? And how many of you are seeking work as an editor? Okay.
And how many of you are editing right now? What? No, get out of here.
Go back to work.
Awesome. Okay, so great. That's awesome. Well then, with that in mind, I wanted to ask the panel, and we can kind of talk about it. But what qualities, or what's like the main quality that you look for in a good editor, or when you're starting to work with people, or just what makes people strong editors? Like what skills do they need, do you think?
Well, for a lot of the stuff we do at Rooster Teeth, it's someone having a good sense of humor. Being able, like, you can talk to someone and it's like, okay, this person seems like they understand the rhythm and just like timing of comedy. That's always really helpful. I mean, and another thing that's just really important is understanding story, because anyone can get on a computer and make cuts, but if they don't understand what's the big picture, how do I construct this narrative, then it doesn't matter. So
Right.
Like someone who just understands story can look at a bunch of random things and say, okay, if I put that there, and that there, then all of a sudden it makes sense.
And to add on to that, I would say, like, to that extent, it's like every cut that you make as an editor means something. Like there's a reason why you use the blade tool and cut something. There has to be a reason. Otherwise, you're not editing. You're just stringing shots together. So
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we've had, like, even the behind the scenes, and the story and the narrative that you're telling. It doesn't have to be a complex thing. It could be as simple as this happened, and then this person saw this, and then this happened. Like, that's the story. That counts, you know? Because editing is, you're essentially using images as words, and you're stringing those words together to try and form a coherent sentence. And I can't tell you how many people we've had who were say, you know, they're like, yeah, I'm an editor. I cut things together, and then we'll say, all right, here's a little behind the scenes segment, and you know, see what you have. And what they put together, it's like, why are we cutting this? What's this? Why did you cut to that? It's like, oh, it's because, you know, like I thought it was interesting. It's like, yeah, but why? Like, there's no reason. I'm talking. There's a voiceover. And it's talking about this thing. Where I'm not seeing it. This is completely, you know, sort of non sequitur. It's like, well, you know, it just felt like it needed to cut, and it's like, nah, that's not editing. There, you're just, as you said, stringing images together randomly, and it's like you have to be someone who is cognizant of the language that you are wielding, and that language is a visual language, and you have to be someone who, in the process of doing that, especially in the sort of a group, you have to, and this is weird, you have to kind of have no respect for other people. Now, let me explain that for a second. And what I mean by that is this, is because when you sit down in front of the computer, you have no respect for the writer, because I don't care what they wrote. You have no respect for the director, because I don't care what they got performance-wise. All you have in front of you is the footage that they got. And that's it. You don't get to pretend that, oh, but it was really good when on the page, or oh, but we were a little bit late that day, so we couldn't finish that scene. It's like, you don't care. All you have is you have to construct the story with what you have in front of you. And that requires you to look at every single process of that and ignore the fact that, you know, oh, we really want this shot because we spent $10,000 on this shot. And we don't, but it's like, nah, but this shot doesn't work for the story they're trying to put together. Or, yeah, but the script said that the actor should be this way. It's like, yeah, but the actor didn't do that on that day. And I don't care what your script said. So in a weird way, you have to not care about everything else that has happened up to that point, so that you can objectively look at what you have in front of you, the tools that you have in front of you, the building blocks that you have in front of you, and then you can actually construct the story, the best possible story, and the most coherent edit from what you actually have.
And that's why, and this is really some unpopular opinion for new filmmakers, is that I always say, if you're a director and you want to edit your own stuff, don't. Like, give it to someone who is an editor and let them play with it. Let them take, you know, they don't have all that emotional baggage that you have attached to your baby, and so you can hand it to them and they can slice it up without any remorse.
Unless you hate yourself.
Unless you hate yourself.
Then it's great.
It's true.
And on the flip side, I'd say if you edit other people's work, like if you're a director, it teaches you a lot to edit someone else's stuff.
Oh yeah, because you start learning like what pieces are necessary and what pieces aren't necessary. And the thing about having an editor as a director is that they can bring something completely new to it that you had no idea was possible, and it might be better than your original idea. And so what's important for me, and especially when putting together tutorials for the film school, which tutorials are inherently boring sometimes, and we try really hard not to make them boring, but we brought Joey Scoma on, who actually, he assembled a lot of VGHS Season 3, and he's incredible, but he has his own very unique sense of humor. And so one thing that, you know, I'll be shooting this and have one idea, and then Joey has a totally different idea, and it's usually better. So having your own distinct sense of style and playing with that is actually really, really important when you're bringing that to a team.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, if you can't find someone else to edit it, or you know, or you don't have people that you can't afford to have someone else edit it, if you edit your own stuff, show it to people. Get
Constantly.
Feedback and listen to it. Don't be like, it's really easy to show it to a bunch of people and then be like, well, this isn't really funny. And you're like, well, I think it's funny. But if you show it to people and they're not laughing, then you're probably wrong.
Yeah, someone says to you, yeah, that was funny. It wasn't funny. They'll tell you because they laughed at it.
Yeah.
You can't sit there on the internet and explain why something works to people when they're watching your videos. Like, but actually, this is how it was, and that's why we did that. Is like, no, people are going to see it straight up, and they're going to have very blunt reactions to it.
That is a make or break it thing for me when looking at new editors. Is like, if you don't take notes, like and literally when you are working with anybody, a client or the director or the producer or whatever, have a notepad and be taking notes. That's a very good thing for someone to see who wants to hire you. Just always have it there. And then also do those notes, and if you don't, defend why you didn't. Like because your role as an editor is to tell a story, and so if you think a $10,000 shot sucks, defend that, but be able to take notes and effectively
Explain why.
Yeah, explain why. Yeah, for sure. And I guess I had a question on here of just like, what do we think the role of the editor is? Because there's a lot of, I always say it's the third writer of a movie. Would you all agree with that? Like you just kind of, because you just kind of
Pretty
throw
much.
everyone.
Well, you're the last writer, I think, to me, and that's almost even the same thing, which is, again, I always think of it as like when you make a movie, you start from infinity and you whittle down infinity. And when you're in the writing stage, you can put whatever you want on the page. So that's infinity, right? Whatever your imagination can come up with, you put on the page. And then when you direct it and you actually commit it to video or film, then you're whittling that down a little bit because you get what you have on that day. And you only have 8 hours. You only have 4 hours. You only have an hour for this with this actor, and they're sick or whatever. You get what you have there, but it's narrower than what it was before. And then the very last step is you only have what you captured there. So it's like very slowly whittling that down. And third writer, absolutely. But in a lot of ways, I think even the last one who gets to touch it is the most important.
Yeah.
Or if it's something like a documentary, it's like maybe the only writer.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you do something where you have a bunch of footage, but there's no script for it, then the editor a lot of times has to like, okay, I'm gonna piece this together. I'm gonna write VO for people, so this scene transitions into the other, or like.
Well, I'm experiencing that now because tomorrow I did a documentary about Achievement Hunter and Let's Play Live, and at 4:30 tomorrow at the Austin Convention Center, but I remember the first edit that I did was such shit. It was awful, and I showed it to Chris. And I'm embarrassed, actually, that I showed it to Chris, because I tried to do something where I was like, oh, I'll do this non-linearly. Like, I'll tell the story out of order. And he watched it. It was long. It was like 35 minutes long. He was like, no. Don't do that. Just throw all of that away. And, like, you need to find your beats. This is your story. And he helped me map out that story. And I was the director. I was just trying something different. And I was just trying, this is the only time that I can experiment, and I did, and it totally blew up. But I listened to Chris and completely redid it, and just like, I deleted everything, I saved it, but I deleted everything. I reiterated, but I deleted everything on my timeline and was like, okay, what worked from my cut and what didn't, I'm starting over. And then I just completely redid it, and now it's like.
When you say that
good.
doing a crappy first draft made your second draft way better, though.
Yes.
You'd like do your crappy first drafts, like love them and despise them at the same time, but you have to get them out because they're never ever gonna be good, and you just have to get the first couple up to 10 really bad drafts out before you can really start doing some good editing.
Yeah, the most disheartening moment is whenever you're working on a project and you put together that first assembly or rough, and then you watch it and you're like, oh my God.
It's like time to
Have
quit.
nothing.
But it's like, we're done.
Yeah.
I just picked a dumb
it was a good
profession.
it was a good
dumb.
try.
Yeah.
But
Idiot,
no, I
let's
mean,
go. Yeah.
the first cut is always rough, but you have to look at it and say, okay, how can I make this better? What am I missing? Like what? There's something was missing from what we shot in the script where things just don't make sense, and you just got to figure that out.
For me, it was the interviews because I thought, oh, I'll look at all my interviews on the day. And I did. I got some, but they didn't fill in the whole story that I ended up trying to tell because I didn't know what the story was when I started. And Chris told me before, he was like, you better get your interviews before you shoot. And I didn't. I was like, no, I want it to be organic. But eventually I did get pickup interviews, and I just got them, telling some stories, and it worked out, it was great. But you're right. There's something missing, and you just have to go back.
There's always something missing.
Yeah.
There's always something missing where you're like, okay, this scene doesn't work for some reason. It's what Freddie's saying.
And when also to sort of add on to that, there's never a moment where you have everything that you want either. You have to kind of be, sort of like a Zen master judo practitioner in that you can't force your will on the footage. You can't be like, this is exactly what I wanted and this is the vision for it. It's like sometimes it's not there. You have to see what the footage is saying to you and say, okay, this is the story that's inherent in here, and be able to tell it and be able to find it.
And once you do that, I mean, if you if you commit to what you have, the audience will never know what you don't have.
Yeah.
You know,
Which is the hardest part about editing, judging someone's editing reel, because it's meaningless. I'm seeing an end product of your whole. You never see what it could have been, what it was. You don't see what the decisions that were made. You only see the final results. The final results doesn't tell you anything about the actual process that went through to get to that point.
That said, because I've looked at a lot of editing reels lately,
Yeah.
and I'm sure some of you will be putting up editing reels or already have them. Do not put a montage of images to music as an editing reel. As a directing reel, that's fine. But I know everyone here can edit something to music. Just put a scene. Put the best scenes that you have that are 30 seconds or a minute long. That shows me something. But a montage doesn't, like,
It's like,
no, okay.
Maybe like going to like Ronaldo and being like, "Hey, you play soccer? How can you dribble?" It's like it's the easiest thing to be able to take, or and then be like, "All right, sick cut, another sick cut." It's like, good work, man. You've mastered the basics. Congratulations. Like it's not, that doesn't tell us anything, especially when we're trying to judge editing skill. Like honestly, the scene, like what I wish people do is give me the scene and then give me the raw footage.
Yeah.
Like just literally just lay out like 3 takes from it so I can have a sense of like, okay, you did this and
That's a perfect segue to the clips that I have, actually.
Oh, yeah, very well.
Yay. Okay, so I wanted to show something and give kind of like not a lesson, but we'll go through the short that Chris starred in, and it's called Office Divorce. I think we released it in January, or I believe. And it was an interesting... I edited it with another person, and then Chris took it at the end. And so what I wanted to do was show you guys about 2 minutes of mostly unedited, just the takes from the day, and we can discuss that. The reason there are 2 images is because they shot dual camera, so that you could potentially do multicam or stack tracks. So I wanted you to see both performances at the same time. And then I'll show you the final version, and we'll discuss, or people can ask questions about it. So, this is about 2 minutes.
I hope this isn't embarrassing.
Or would you rather have Ryan?
Good job, Chris.
So context for that is
Sorry, I totally didn't set up that scene.
I'm trying to. I go and schedule a meeting with Ryan where I tell him I want to get divorced, and he's like, "We're not married." I'm like, "Well, but in the settlement, I get your office." And so in the process of trying to take over his office, I kidnap his children and then make his daughter decide who gets his office in a custody battle.
Okay. And hilarity ensues. But so you can see that there's a lot of, and that's 2 minutes of, you guys did 3 takes of that scene, of just that. Then there's the coverage of Carrie, and there's the coverage of the little girl. And so there's like 16 minutes maybe of you guys going back and forth. And I don't think all of that's scripted. Like, they're coming up with ways to convince each other that they want, for the daughter to pick. So, I don't know. Do we want to see the final scene and then talk about it? Or do you want to talk about any of the challenges we had in the editing room?
Sure, let's just play the scene, I guess.
Play the scene.
Well, I'm curious actually real quick before you
Sure.
do. It sounds like, so obviously I think the big thing there is trying to define the arc of his, because you can't just go the 100 and just be like, oh, here's candy and then just have it stay there the whole time. So it feels like the challenge for this one is like, where do you start and where do you end with, essentially you're doing straight man and sort of like, and sort of ridiculous character, right, as sort of a back and forth, right? So I'm curious. I want to see where it goes.
Okay, here we go. So did that go where you thought it was going to go, Freddie?
Yeah, it's pretty much like the difficulty there is like, because you have so much stuff, right? The question is like, where do you end it? And a lot of times, looking at just having seen sort of the raw footage on that, the question is like, where do you get to in terms of the end point? And then it's about filling in, backfilling it, and trying to make sure it builds up convincingly to that,
Mm-hmm. And I remember we went through like that scene originally was long. I cut it long so that everybody could see. Okay, here are the jokes that everybody's kind of, that that we've set up, and here are
Right,
the
right.
best jokes. And then the directors come in and are like, okay, well, let's lose that one, let's tighten this one, you know, and then it just
Well, because
gets
there's also
shorter and
the
shorter.
thing that you're fighting in that type of scene specifically is also based on the raw footage. It's like it's pretty clear that one is offering a much better argument, right? Immediately, so it doesn't behoove you to like just continue on the joke side, because it's like at a certain point as an audience member you're looking at it, you're like there's no real counter argument to candy and toys and so and so. So at a certain point it's like, well, this scene doesn't need to be even that long, because you know pretty quickly, oh, he's winning because he's bribing, essentially, you know, and then you can just get to that point, and then that must be difficult then too, because I'm sure there's plenty of great stuff that you had in there originally where it's like, oh, it's a really funny moment though, but you have to be considerate of like, well, if everyone knows where this is going, then we're just sitting here just making jokes for joke's sake, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first cut of that was like 7 minutes, and I think the
The
final,
whole thing. Yeah, the whole short.
And then the final thing ended up being 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's killing babies, you know. You're like,
that's
oh, I really like this joke. Not actual children that are in the. I know there are children, and that's confusing, but no, I mean, it's like you have jokes like, well, I really like this joke, but I mean, a lot of times you may have really funny jokes or really funny bits, but in the end, you're only going to hurt yourself by including all of them. You have to pick, like, how is this going to move the scene? How is it going to carry the audience through it? And yeah, like what Freddie was saying, it's like you get it at a certain point. You just got to go through and then finish.
And Rocket Jump does a lot of comedy shorts online. Comedy seems like the thing that
Yeah.
the internet's perfect for. But
Well-
do you guys want to talk about like the anatomy of building up, you know, or successfully editing comedy? Is there anything that we can?
No, I think what's interesting is like, you know, we do comedy and we do action, right? And a lot of people think, oh, well, the action must be difficult. You got all these camera stuff. So in a weird way, the way we shoot it, it's actually the easiest stuff we edit, because we don't shoot it in such a way that makes it. You don't have that many options at a given moment, right? You know, in performance and in dialogue and that, there's a lot of questions in terms of like, when do we look at this person? Is it saying something interesting? Is there a good time for a reaction shot here? Does that make sense? Do we extend? Do we, you know, a lot of questions there. But for action, it's like, no, action is very straightforward. It is stuff happens. This person jumps up and goes to this part of the room, and it's like, all right, what's the most efficient way that I can show that? And this is what we shot. And it actually becomes very simple because it's a very basic sort of story that's being told, which is one of physicality and space and spatial dimension, which
It's
is
a pure form of cause and effect.
yeah. It's like he stood up and then the person saw him. You know, it's like it's very simple in that way. And so for us, when we look at doing comedy specifically, comedy is like it's just of everything I think extraordinarily difficult. I mean, we've done some very very dramatic stuff, and while that presents challenges in its own right, comedy has that sort of extra side of you have to anticipate what the audience is thinking, but also you yourself have become so familiar with the material that you start to lose track of what is funny and does this work and is this enough timing. And in those situations, you know, what you're talking about in terms of showing people is invaluable, because even then it's like you don't want to laugh, for example, to cover up a line, right? And there's been plenty of situations where we see something like, you know what, this is great, this plays, and you play in front of someone, it's like, oh, it's too fast. The jokes are coming too fast, and they're actually not even getting key pieces of information because they're laughing over a previous one, and you're just like, okay, we need to space this out and throw a reaction shot in there. But it really is all about arcs and everything grounded in sort of character motivation and what does this person want and how do we show it and how do we get from point A to point B succinctly and in hopefully an entertaining way.
Yeah, and that a lot of what Rocket Jump does, and I found, is that getting more and more experience with editing and how edit works makes you a better director. It makes you a better shooter. It makes you a better filmmaker because you start
Better actor too.
better actor. I know, like, editing BTS for how many months definitely made me a better documentary shooter because I started to know how things piece together, and I'm starting to understand action a lot better, like seeing how things cut together. And I'm mostly thinking about, you know, a 15-pound camera on my shoulder.
Right.
But then when I'm watching this happen in my screen, I start thinking, oh, well, that doesn't quite mix with what happens after this, and I'm able to contribute to that as well.
Is there anything in particular that, because I'm sure a lot of people here maybe like will be a production assistant on something, or, you know, go and shoot something, you know, be a cinematographer, whatever. But is there any other things outside of editing that informs you as an editor? You know, like I know, like shooting something, you'll see the mistakes that you made on set.
Yeah, I mean, well, to me, it's like if you don't see the footage that you're shooting, then you're never going to know what mistakes you're making.
Yeah, it would be like you're trying to learn how to paint, but you couldn't see the final product of it. You can only sort of like paint like one little square at a time, and then you're like, all right, I'm done with this painting. It's like, well, how good are you at painting? How can you learn? Learning is you have to have feedback, right? And in various forms, you need feedback that you can respond to. And I say it's also for acting too. It's huge. I think every actor should cut themselves and edit themselves. Sorry, too much lingo. But I think everyone should, because there's so much stuff where you watch it and you're just like, and this is weird. Like you start to learn really weird stuff about people when you stare at them, and it's like, oh, this person, their eyes don't blink at the same time. Left eye goes first always. And it's like this person has a weird look to the right. Like one of the weirdest experiences that I've had recently is. Joanna Bradley, who plays Jenny Matrix in Video Game High School, I've cut tons and tons and tons of footage with her in any range of comedy, super emotional scenes, just everything. And I know every one of her mannerisms now at this point. And literally watching, she's on a show called Unreal, which is on Showtime, I think. It's about like a reality show that's like the sort of behind this, it's a show about a reality show. And she has scenes that are like, some of them are similar sort of to VGHS scenes. And I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, she's doing that thing. Oh, they use that take. I guarantee you this is the first take. It's like you literally start to watch it and be like, oh, they're cutting up the last take of her on that one. Oh, she got tired of this. It's like literally because you know that person so well in terms of all their mannerisms. And at the end of the day, that's all people are doing in terms of acting, in terms of what's going on in front of the cameras. It's just communicating to you in nonverbal ways, story and character beats and motivations and things like that.
Well, and it's in a weird way like that. A lot of times actors, you can base your edits just on the little idiosyncrasies of the actor, because an actor will naturally have moments where they do something because it feels like the end of a beat, or
that's when you know. That's when you know if you have a really good actor.
It'll be like a
thing. Have you seen this?
The blink. Yeah, like.
Have you noticed this?
The what?
With a really really good actor, they'll oftentimes blink within 1 or 2 frames of when you feel it's natural to do a cutaway.
Yeah, exactly.
Or when the thought's finished, because they're sort of naturally, it's like you're refreshing your mind there a little bit, and it's like. Their timing and being in tune with that, you can literally see that. And there's even scenes in like Video Game High School. I think we were using it for Key Ellery, who is incredible as an actress, because if you go through those scenes, every single cut happens within like 3 frames of one of her blinks, and it's exactly where, and she was so in tune with that, and that's how you can kind of feel, oh, this person's really in this scene. They're really part of it, because their brain is literally subconsciously making their face react in a way that's natural to processing a thought as it comes to them.
Yeah, and then whenever you're editing someone who doesn't have as much experience acting, they'll blink in weird places.
Yeah,
and you'll be like, God damn, this person blinks so weird.
Well, Fincher gets so weird about that. A lot of his visual effects is like removing blinks, because it's like this person blinked. And it's weird with the cut, so therefore they're not going to blink now. It's like stuff like that, because we're very in tune to eye contact, and you can see the rhythm gets kicked off a little bit sometimes. If someone blinks and then it cuts, and it's just like, sort of 2 things are sort of happening at once, you know?
Did you guys also see the thing that Fincher does where he cuts the screen in half?
Oh, we do that constantly.
Yeah, and then he'll use reaction shots from he'll have 2 people in the same shot, but they're from completely different takes, because he's designed it so that he can cut the film in half and just mix their takes and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of split
I
screening
think it's
happening.
cheating, but whatever.
Well, you got to work with what's got.
I mean that it has to do with like taking the tools that you have and using as best you can.
Speaking of which, I wanted to bring up if we just before we do our Q&A, because I want to give everybody time to do Q&A. On the more technical side, I found an article. Or no, a journal entry that Freddie wrote like 3 years ago.
Way back.
80
years ago on the internet. Years.
I was Googling when I found out you were on the panel. I was like, okay, I'm going to do some research into their workflow and stuff like that. And you talked about switching from Macs to PCs.
Yeah.
And you investigated Avid. You investigated FCB10, which at the time had a really bad rollout. So my question is, what did you guys end up doing? What do you work in? And have you re-investigated FCB10 since?
So it's a mix. So we're 100% PC based, and we are 100% Creative Cloud. So we're Premiere, After Effects, stuff like that. It's like, you don't have to clap for that. It's like I drive a Honda. It's like it's a tool. Yeah, that's right. It's a minivan. Sick. No, at the end of the day, it's like tools. It's no different than a carpenter being like, I use a Makita power drill. I use a DeWalt power drill. It's like, whatever. It's a tool. Whatever works for you. Makita got a little clap. Good. That's what I'm talking about. So that's where we are 100%. And it works for everything that we're doing, especially since we do a lot of visual effects. The integration with After Effects is very helpful in that regard. And we've looked at Final Cut again. But the difficulty, of course, is that in order to switch back, we would have to get like 10 new computers and everything. It's a lot harder when you have a lot of people editing on something to switch back. But I've always said it's about the tool. It's not about the tool itself is just that, and it's the craftsman using it that is able to sort of best take advantage of it. And it really doesn't matter, people get into these sort of big hot-headed editing debates. And at the end of the day, it's like, hey, do what works for you. Use whatever program feels natural to you and does everything that you need it to do.
Yeah, one of the things that we say at the film school is like, if you take good storytelling concepts, it doesn't matter what software you're on. I mean, you're going to have a lot more headaches if you're working with iMovie or something free like that. You're going to lose a few years off your life.
Yeah.
But the basic concepts of cutting and crossfading and rhythm and that kind of stuff come down to you rather than your software.
We've been having this discussion at Rooster Teeth too, and had the heated editing debates and whatnot.
Oh man, I love those.
We won't have them here, but I was investigating last year. I remember at the editing panel, I was just starting to work with Final Cut Pro 10 and cut a very long, 45-minute thing with it. And recently, my documentary was cut in Final Cut Pro 10, and $1 Million But is cut on Final Cut 10. And
Daniel has a boner for Final Cut 10.
That's what I'm saying.
But
I love it. I've become a better editor for it because of just the problems that it has solved and the workflow issues that are just seamless now, and conforming isn't an issue, and just finding information is very quick. So I've become about 3 or 4 times faster than I used to be. So that's why I have a boner for it.
yeah. I mean, but like Freddie was saying, it's all tools. Like Daniel, he really likes Final Cut X. The issue is that we've had at Rooster Teeth is no one uses it.
It's hard to find people. It's hard to find people.
We use Premiere and the Adobe suite as our primary post-production software, because when we're looking for editors, we're like, well, that's what people have experience with, and it works, and it's a tool. It's like it's all about who. It's not the tool that matters; it's who's using it. And if
unless that person is a tool.
Yeah.
That said, slowly but surely. Anyway, I wanted to ask one more question, actually, of Lauren, because I specifically wanted to get you or just I wanted to talk about women in the industry, and especially editorial, and you have a different perspective on that, a very specific one. And I remember, man, seeing Mad Max this year, like that movie is so investigate. If you haven't watched the movie or investigated the CGI, and you guys just did like a big CGI posting about Mad Max, right?
We just got over 3 million views.
It was a great little lesson on. If you guys haven't seen it,
it's called "Why CG Sucks Except That It Doesn't."
and there was a similar one. That someone said it was called center frame, and keeping everything center, because the director specifically kept all the action in center frame so that the editor, your eye trace is really important with action. So if you're looking left and right and up and down, you're going to lose flow of the action. So he specifically told his cinematographers on set, no, center up.
Yep.
So that your eye's looking at the same spot every time.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a whole video essay on Mad Max because I just love it so much, and there's something really interesting popped up with the center frame thing, which I'm gonna get nerdy about cinematography really quick. A lot of women are framed up, the golden ratio or whatever. You have that specific marker. That's where the boobs are framed almost 98% of the time. But in Mad Max, their face is the center of that frame. And so the cinematography, I'm going to go on a huge rant later this year about how feminist the cinematography is. But the interesting thing about Mad Max was that George Miller insisted that his wife cut it, and she's a documentary film editor, and he was like, I don't want a man to edit this movie because it's going to look like every other action movie out there. Which I thought was really interesting, and that's the main thing about having more diverse people in your field is that they have other views that you don't have. They have more perspective. They have different creative tendencies, and you're losing a whole viewpoint of half the world if you don't hire women, or if you accidentally realize, oh, we didn't hire any you have to, right now we're at a point in the industry where you really have to make an effort to go and find women and people of color and minorities and all of that, because the industry sucks right now. So you do have to make that effort, but hopefully we'll get to a point where it's commonplace.
And I think it starts at a young age, because I used to work at a film camp, and we would just make movies with kids, and it's like, if you start early and just give the girls the action roles, or let them run something. It's like, just take that little bit of effort so that at a young age they know,
yeah,
I
it's
can
very,
do it. That's when the change will happen.
Yeah, it's very natural for people to assume that young boys will be better at technical stuff, and so girls start learning that. Like, if you give my little brother would be handed the camera or something like that, girls will just start internalizing that, and they'll fill in whatever role needs to happen, because they're team players. They want to help out. They want to be part of it. But if you're constantly telling girls that they're not interested in something, they're gonna be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go do this other thing over here. So
also, I think, and real quick, I think the greatest editors of all time, all female. I think the far and away the greatest
Thelma
editors, film editors,
Schoonmaker.
Thelma Schoonmaker, Sally Menke, the late Sally Menke, greatest of all time. What's interesting, actually, from a historical perspective, Marsha Lucas, which saved the Star Wars movies are
we
only
have
good
Star Wars because of Marsha Lucas.
Yeah. But my favorite quote was Thelma Schoonmaker, who was Scorsese's editor. Someone asked her, assuming as a woman she had delicate sensibilities. She's like, but aren't all his movies just so violent? Like, how can you how do you stand how violent Scorsese's movies are? And her response was, yeah, but you see, my edits made them that way. It's like, yes, exactly.
Yeah, girl.
Such a good quote.
Yeah,
That's so
actually,
good.
the top grossing film directors of today all use Spielberg, I believe, Tarantino, J.J. Abrams. Everybody uses a female editor, so I encourage everybody to take up the mantle.
And we have Kelly on Walking Dead, who has won a couple Emmys now, and she did Breaking Bad as well. She's one of my favorite editors. And another Kelly, who just my friend from film school, if you remember Kelly Stuyvesant, she's on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. now, and she did some stuff on Psych, and they're just my favorite people. Just love them.
So I think we can do Q&A now. If anybody has questions and wants to jump up onto the mic, please feel free.
By the way, have I told you? I have a theory for that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Whit, and I have two questions. One of them is an easy one. One of them is more of a question about my future and possibly anybody else's in here. The first
Let
one
me get
is
the crystal ball out.
what is your opinion on really solidly edited film or TV? Like, give me a few examples. Recently, I watched It Follows, and I really liked the editing in that. Do you guys have any that you particularly enjoy besides Mad Max, which is obviously amazing?
Well-edited movies. So what's difficult about Oscars, oftentimes when you go to, 90% of the Oscars, you can replace the word best with the word most, and that's actually what you're getting. So it's not best costume design, it's most costume design. It's not best sound design, it's the most sound design. Those are the ones that usually win because you're talking about, in terms of that sort of judgment. So it's hard to sort of say, but what's really interesting to me is, because what you're saying is what is clear storytelling, and that starts not just from the editor's side of you, but that starts from the shot design and the pre-production, the visualization side of it. I think I was really impressed recently with the new Mission Impossible, specifically the opera sequence, which I think should be studied. Really, really, really well done. And that's a sequence where the entire tension of that scene is based entirely on spatial information that you're getting from editing. There's no tension in that scene if you don't know this person's here, to their right is this person, and across the way there's another person doing this. The entire scene is based on just that, and wordlessly. It's not like you get a really obvious sort of way. They're not telling you this, and you pick up on it, and it works incredibly well. It's probably one of the best examples in a recent movie of editing used to communicate very clearly drama just off of edits and the information that you're getting from it.
And I would another McQuarrie project would be Edge of Tomorrow, really well edited movie where they could have cut to black every single time that he warps, back, but they don't. They trust. Sometimes you have to trust the audience to know where the spatial reasoning or the where they are.
And also, I'll say any Spielberg movie.
Any Spielberg.
Damn it, you stole my answer.
Well, as a cinematographer, one thing that's really really popular right now, especially with Emmanuel Lubezki, is the really long one takes, and so it's like a big thing, and it calls attention to itself. But if you go to Emmanuel Lubezki's early movies like Working Girl, The Birdcage, he has those really long takes, but they're very subtle. And it just lets the actors play, and they don't cut because they don't need to. And it's really, really interesting how they frame stuff and block stuff. And I think the editing in those films is really interesting. And to see that compared to the flashbang of the long one takes now is a really interesting thing. And then with digital and watching our movies now on our cell phones, there's a lot more. If you go back to the older movies, there's a lot more wider frames, wider framing and less cutting, and now we're kind of edging more towards fast, cutty, close-up stuff. Yeah. So I like watching the those older Lubezki movies and that kind of stuff, and Spielberg.
Movies,
this is an example of something I thought needed more editing. It just needed to be cut down. Was Wolf of Wall Street to me? It's a great movie. It's really funny, but at the end of it, I was still like, man. They let too many babies go unkilled. I
didn't feel that way. I felt that movie was a fast 3 hours, and also I would argue that the excess of the long cut is part of the thesis.
Yeah.
Of that movie.
That was the only reason. To me, it's like, okay, I see what they're going. They just want this to be this. Yeah, the movie itself is so excessive in that respect. But at the end, to me, I still felt like, man, I feel like I would have felt better if that was like 15 minutes shorter.
Pretty much any movie could stand to lose a little bit somewhere, right? Yeah. And then the best part about Scorsese, the way he cuts and Schoonmaker cuts, is that he has no regard for continuity, which I'm a big fan of. But like even Wolf of Wall Street, there's straight up overs where dirty over where someone there'll be someone's clearly talking.
Yeah,
and it's like whatever. Performance is
performance
important on top of it.
Most important thing.
And you may notice it, but I think what's interesting is that you look at the way these movies play. 99% of the people watching movies don't realize it, and they're just like, "Oh no, I'm here for the performance of the actors." Yeah, and that's what's more important.
I mean, there's a rule, a hierarchy of what you cut for, and like the number one thing you want to cut for is how are people performing and acting. And
story is actually second to performance.
But it's like story and characters, and then everything else is like people will forgive.
I remember there was one, I forgot what short it was, but there was a slightly out of focus shot that you guys picked.
Yeah, sorry.
Because the performance was better, and I was just like, oh, it's so embarrassing.
So this is
but
where
it works way better than the in focus shot.
This is where being a jerk helps.
Yep.
Sorry, this shot was better.
And my second question is, seeing as how colleges are more expensive than ever, do you guys think it's worth it to go to college for film, or do you guys think it's better to have experience in the field and save $200 to $250,000? Because I visited UT, and I mean, it's a great film school.
It won't cost you $250,000, I'll tell you that much.
Right. Well, the thing is, I come from out of state, and it's like $45,000 a year, and that student loan's awful. And so, do you guys think it's worth it to get more experience in the field rather than in the classroom?
It really depends on how you learn. The thing that I got out of film school was the connections I made and the friends I made. Like, I knew Freddie freshman year. He was my next door neighbor freshman dorm. Like, we were separated by a closet.
Yeah.
I think he was on the boys' side. I was on the girls' side. And I learn really well in an academic environment. Like, I have space and safety to mess up and do that kind of stuff. But a lot of people feel trapped and kind of like, I want to get going. I feel stifled. I don't want to have to worry about grades. And it's all kind of more how you learn best And a lot of people, I mean, it's not necessary to go to film school at all. It's all about how you get your experience. And if, even if you are in film school, I'd still be like, keep shooting your own stuff, edit your own stuff, just get experience wherever you can. Like we didn't get to shoot anything really freshman year, so our entire dorm floor would shoot stuff ourselves when we weren't learning in class. Like 5 Second Film started that way.
On the DVX 100. The days of logging footage.
I'll say this about film school. For me, I've never taken an editing class, never done it, but that's what I do, and it's partially because in school I took a directing class that helped me deconstruct every aspect of a film and learning story, and so for me that was a great way to do it because I needed that like structure and that thing to help me kind of figure it out, and like a light bulb went off junior year of college and where I understood it, and I remember that distinctly. Other people, it's just by doing, and so there's no right or wrong answer. It's really just whatever works.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it goes back to what these guys were saying, or it's not about the classes themselves. It's about the environment and the people that you'll meet. I mean, the people I worked with when I was a freshman in college, I still work with. I work with half of them at Rooster Teeth, and then the other half I just, like my friend like Zach Hanner, who you might have seen on YouTube. Like I met him freshman year, and I was like, I want to work with that guy.
Funny dude.
So we met up and we started working together. It's about finding people that you work well with, and just making stuff. I mean, you shouldn't go to film school because you're like, oh, I want to go to film school so that I can. Because I want to be a director. You should be like, I'm making movies now. I want to go to film school because I want to continue doing what I'm already doing and just keep learning and meeting people. Because freshman year, like you don't get the opportunity to like make a big feature or anything freshman year or anything. But you should be making stuff all the time, just because you're gonna make a bunch of bad stuff.
Right.
Chris can attest to that.
Yeah.
Oh snap!
You're gonna make a lot of bad stuff, and the sooner you make things and figure out what your voice is and what you are good at and what you enjoy doing, then it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for your question.
So a lot of what we do is a learning process. So like you said, get your bad stuff out of the way first. But somewhere along that line, most people have sort of an aha moment, for lack of a better term. What was your guys' sort of aha moment that really kind of changed your editing path for the better?
I think it was very early. For me, it was sort of early on in terms of realizing. Like, I think the first time I edited anything, it was a sick video set to music. It was vacation footage that my family had gone on in New York, set to I Heard It Through the Grapevine, the great Motown classic, which doesn't make any sense now that I think about it, like at all. But what was interesting about it was being able to see that process and sort of see, oh, I'm taking all this stuff and building this out of it was so interesting to me that was like hooked from that point on. And that's how what really, for me, even just beginning down the road of filmmaking did not come from a photographic place or come from the idea of like wanting to take pictures or movies, but it came from the process of editing personally. And that was kind of like the big thing that kicked everything forward for me, at least.
My aha moment was realizing I was a better shooter than I was a better editor. And so I was like, I was really into editing. I was working in post. I was at USA Network. I was doing all that kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what? I put in all this time. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. And so you just got to kind of check in with yourself. And sometimes you work really hard towards one thing and you realize, you know what? This is not working. Not working.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I just remember the first moment when I realized I could edit, because I'd been shooting stuff with VHSs on camcorders and doing in-camera editing and double VHSs put together. And then I freshman year of high school, I went did a video technology class. I was like, oh, there's this. I can actually use software.
Computers.
Yeah.
Whoa.
This is way easier now. But then it's like one of those things where you start doing it, and then you realize that all those things, all those movies you've seen, the little, you had no idea why they worked, but all of a sudden you like figuring out, oh, this is why you shoot, this is the 180 degree. You start figuring out all these rules, and it's like it's a language, and that to me was so cool. Whenever I started deciphering that language.
I have two, but like one's kind of. Well, I was at South by Southwest one year, and this random guy who ended up working at Ain't It Cool News gave me he was like, "Who are you punk kid," or whatever, and we started talking a little bit, but he knew Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman and got a $100 bill signed for me, and it was like, "You will direct," and and they signed their names, and I was like, okay, maybe I should go into film. And I just remember that moment distinctly. However, from a more technical standpoint, that directing class that I told you about, for me, it didn't have anything to do with editing. It was when we were assigned 2 scenes from a movie, and you have to direct and recreate that scene as you want. And I chose Risky Business and got assigned American Beauty. And when the teacher basically said, how like you're always looking for what your characters want. Every character needs a want in a scene or a need, and that's going to get you from place to place. That just was it clicked, and I was like, oh, every edit is going to be that, and so it just made sense for me from that point on. So
Thank you.
looks like we have 5 minutes, so we have to do like a lightning round of questions.
Here's what works, by the way. Ask yours. Next 2 people ask yours as well, and then we'll answer all 3.
Okay, I have a question mainly for you two from Rooster Teeth.
Suck it, Rocket Jump.
Oh, I've destroyed you guys in Rocket League. You don't want to repeat.
Well, I guess it could be for Freddie too.
Sitting right here.
Well, yeah.
Do you, when you edit, do you do it more off your sense of humor, or do you do it more for like Bernie, or do you do it like, I guess you're the leader too, so you kind of do it off yours either way. But do you like make it how you would see funny, or do you more imagine how a person watching would see it funny?
So whose sense of humor? All right. Next question.
Like-
You want to do that?
Yeah,
It
oh,
works
yeah,
really
that
well.
sounds
It works
good,
really
yeah.
well.
All right. So when you get the footage into the edit bay, how long does it take to push out like a typical short, and how many revisions do you go
Okay.
through?
Short and number of revisions.
What's your favorite style of project to kind of make and edit?
Okay.
Like,
Style of project.
When you're working on a new machine, what are your favorite things to do when you're first setting up your programs?
Keyboard shortcuts.
Keyboard shortcuts. All right, that'll be good. That'll be good. We'll answer these right now. We'll answer
pause.
these right now.
Okay, so sense of humor. First and foremost, I trust myself. If I'm editing something, I'm going to do whatever I think is funny. But I'll always leave in things that I don't particularly find funny, but I think other people might. And then it's that process of showing people and seeing what do people laugh at? What are people responding to? Do they get this joke? And then that informs the next edit where I'm like, okay, this is what people responded to.
Yep.
Cut the rest.
I just try to make Chris laugh.
Aw.
Yeah.
I always tell young filmmakers, make stuff that makes you laugh and that you like. Because if you're making stuff that you think other people might like, you're going to get really bored really fast. You're going to make crappy movies. So make stuff that you really, really want to be a part of.
Who
And
do you know better than yourself?
And the second question, how
Shorts.
fast of a project and shorts, and how many revisions?
Depends. Generally, we'll do. There's an assembly, which I don't usually do, and see a rough assembly, and then just a fine cut from there. When we get into a fine cut, it's about 3 days, 2 or 3 days nonstop for going through it.
for a short.
For a short, and just 10 to 15 minutes worth of stuff. But otherwise, like other stuff, it'll be 1 a week. And we just crank through it speed wise. Really depends.
We're about the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hey, look at that.
Yeah.
And style of projects that you like. Action's always fun because honestly it's easy, and it also just feels like if you can combine the action and comedy. For us is kind of why we do that, is because you get the fun of comedy, but also you get the sort of satisfaction of doing action.
I don't get to work on them as often as I'd like, but I love genre stuff. Like comedy's just something that, like Rooster Teeth does so much
Yeah.
comedy that I try to keep up with them. But like my bread and butter is just a horror film or action. Like I really love doing horror, and that tense. Trying to build tension is very difficult, but very fun.
Yeah.
I guess from an editing perspective, doing anything that's more documentary or even just reality stuff
Same here.
it's more exciting as an editor because you get to shape the story in so many ways, and there's so many different possibilities, as opposed to a script where there's the story and you have to figure out the best way of telling this story. But when there's no script, then it's like you make the story.
You get to discover a lot, which is the fun part, I think, of documentary editing.
You're sitting in front of a new computer. What do you do?
Porn.
Load up FCB 10. Wait, download
Download
FCB 10.
SC10 legally. No, I plug in my trackball, which I use.
Yeah.
Unplug the mouse, plug in the trackball, and then scream at whoever was the idiot before with their crappy keyboard shortcuts as I load up my awesome keyboard shortcuts.
Am
So
I
I
that
don't know
nerd
if-
who tests the color of my...
Oh, whoa! You check the color of your monitor?
Hey, I'm doing color correction.
I don't know if the Guardians are going to kick me out yet, but
Let's
we'll try to do
Let's do the last one.
last round.
So a lot of times you guys release stuff. Sometimes you may notice an error or something afterwards. Do you sometimes go back, edit that stuff, and put it out? Or do you think that's okay to do? I see a lot of directors, they release director's cut because they think for whatever reason the original cut isn't their vision, so they go back and do it. I know you guys said you should always hand it off, so in that sense, do you think it's okay to edit something when you notice a mistake after it's already been released, or do you just stand by it?
Errors. What
well,
do you want
I'm going to keep going.
Want to crank him?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
let's crank through 'em.
So you said that it's better for the editor to not care about other people on that.
I
did the
said
movie,
that, and this
basically?
may not be shared
Yeah.
by the others on this panel.
But also that editing gives you a lot of insight into filmmaking. So do you think it's a good idea or not to have the editor on set, assuming that he's not doing
On-set
anything
editors,
else?
question mark. All right.
What do you guys believe was the hardest thing for you to master technically when it came to editing?
Technical mastery.
Is there a place for someone who's more of a jack of all trades, like they can help out with any aspect of production, or do you need to actually focus on one specific thing above all others?
Jacks of all trades.
Like, can you find a career if you're just like a jack of all trades or something like that?
All right.
Those are some good questions.
Yeah,
Actually,
good
just
question.
looking for general advice on editing horror and suspense movies. Like Daniel said, it's hard.
Horror is the hardest. All right. Okay, here we go.
Okay, first one.
Errors. What to do?
Do you release them or not?
They're already released.
Yeah.
Pixar
So-
always says movies never finish. It's just released.
That's true.
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, to me, a lot of times I'll go back and look at a project I worked on, and if I have a deadline where, okay, we shot this a week ago, and then we need to turn it around in a week, sometimes I'm not happy exactly the way it ended up being edited, or a lot of times I won't have the perspective that I need. So there's times where stuff comes out, and I'm like, oh man, I really should have cut another 2 minutes off of this, but I didn't because I didn't have that perspective at that time. Most of the time, I don't go back and edit stuff because I'm more concerned about the project I'm looking at next, not the ones I already made. So, I mean, if you feel the desire to go back and re-edit stuff, that's fine, but really you should be looking at your next project.
You're not going to get any better by revisiting the same project over and over again. Like a finished film is better than a perfect film because a perfect film doesn't quite exist.
Tell that to Ridley Scott. Okay, on-set editor, yes. Next question.
We say no.
I was going to say
really?
no.
Yeah,
I
we
was
say
going to say
no.
no.
That's what you
I
get
think it's
a
really- I think it's really
script
helpful.
Script supervisor for.
Yeah.
Depends on the person generally, but again, if you hate everything and you think it's all stupid anyway, then perfect, you can be on set. But we found a lot of times that some of the best cuts come from someone who's completely fresh to it, and it gives them that perspective of being like, I have no idea what you guys are trying to do, but this is what you got in front of me.
Yeah,
Oh, sure.
you have objectivity that you don't have. If you're on set, there may be something that's really funny at that moment, but then the footage,
You might be
for whatever
chasing that
reason,
funny.
there's something wrong. Like, there's a weird composition.
Or just
that-
doesn't read as well.
Yeah. So it's like someone can go into and just say, okay,
That said, sometimes the editor has a completely different perspective from the director and will say, you need to get that insert because the
That's also
director's
very
not getting
important.
the insert and the editor knows this scene's a mess. I'm going to need that insert, and it
That's
saves
fair
you
too. That's fair too.
saves you a ton of time.
That's
What
where
was the hardest
editing
thing?
helps you become a better director.
Hardest thing to master technically. I don't think I've mastered anything really.
I think story. I still haven't mastered it, so I'm constantly learning new things about story.
rhythm. It's like just understanding how something flows. The rhythm of a scene. Someone can edit a scene and everything is there, the dialogue is there, the music is there, but it just doesn't feel right. And a lot of that is just, I don't know, experience. I don't know.
Making my cuts invisible was really hard. Like you shouldn't notice good editing, and that's something like when I started editing and still like it feels very edit-y. with my style. So like learning how to make that feel invisible was extremely hard and still is.
Cross-cut montage is super hard. It's like the hardest thing to do because it's like why are we looking at this? It's raw, just image-based sort of communication, and that's some of the hardest stuff. Is there a place for jacks of all trades?
Rooster Teeth is a place for jack of all trades.
So
It used to be. It used to be.
I mean,
when it was smaller. Well, now because we're now getting into we
Well,
need this person.
Here's the deal: is everyone should. I mean, it's good to have a base knowledge of everything, and then in that way you'll discover what, one, you're good at, and two, what you're passionate about. You may think you want to be a writer, but then whenever you're actually writing and you're shooting and you're editing initially, you're like, actually, you know what? I really like cinematography, and that's what you want to do. So it's like we were saying, when someone who's a director has never edited, then they don't really know a lot of times what they're doing. Like, you should have a base knowledge of everything, but but pursue what you're passionate about because you're going to be better.
If you really want to move forward and up and out and start making better stuff, then it's really good to find that one thing that really makes your brain tick and you get excited about, or else you're just kind of you'll get stuck in the jack of all trades and you won't really move forward anywhere.
And finally, general advice on
horror and suspense.
Horror. Sounds like Homer?
Homer.
Like The Simpsons?
Are you sure you're not a doctor?
Similar to what Freddie said about Rogue Nation, I'd actually say that knowing sense of space and especially off-screen space is super important, and knowing when to not withholding information from your audience with the edit can be powerful. So if you can just stick in a close-up with someone and the sound design is filling in the imagination, that is more powerful than seeing the monster. You know, sometimes you don't want to see the monster until the end of the movie or whatever, but like being able to control that space and what the audience knows, I think that is probably super helpful.
I would just say maybe thinking it's similar in that vein, editing maybe from the perspective of the character you're following in the scene.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because you want to
point of view.
You want to put the audience in the person who's being stalked by the killer. You want the audience to feel that character. So you want to edit so that you're following them through it, and you see only kind of what they see, or so that they can be in that emotional state.
And getting that and communicating that to the viewer is very difficult, right? It's about a lot of horror and suspense is about expectation and either subversion or a confirmation of expectation. So so you have to be in a situation where you have to be very attuned to what people understand when they understand it, and exactly what they're expecting in any given moment, and that takes a lot of experience in just editing in general, you know. But I think that horror editing, suspense editing is some of the hardest stuff that you can do, and it really focus on what does the character know, what does the character know, but also what does your viewer know. And it's also often helpful to, as you're going through it, you know, like keep an eye on someone watching it and always be exposing people with fresh eyes to that, because that's your best feedback.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that I do with cinematography, and this might help with editing too, is I watch my favorite films with the sound off after I've seen them a couple times, and you can watch like where the camera is, when do they cut, why is this angle here.
Steven Soderbergh did that with Indiana Jones and
required
Raiders.
viewing.
Yeah,
Required
you should
viewing.
go watch that.
It's black and white. It has ambient music with it, and you can just watch blocking. You can watch editing. You can watch where the camera is. You can. It's. You watch it several times.
Dude, I watched it and almost quit making movies because just like Steven Spielberg's better than anybody. As I watched it, like, this is the best.
Hang in there, Freddie. You'll make it.
I was I was like, what's the point? What's the point when Steven Spielberg is already better forever? Anyway.
Okay, well, thank you, panel, and thank you, audience.